Welcome to Acta Non Verba, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of the most influential figures in history. I'm your host, William, and today we're exploring the life and legacy of one of the 20th century's most controversial leaders, Joseph Stalin. Stalin's rule over the Soviet Union transformed it into a global superpower, but came at an enormous human cost. Was he a visionary leader who built a modern state out of chaos, or was he a tyrant whose policies led to the suffering and death of millions? Today we'll uncover the complexities of Stalin's life, his rise to power, his policies, and his lasting impact on the world. Joseph Stalin was born Joseph Vissarionis Djugashvili on December 18, 1878, in Gori, a small town in the Russian Empire's region of Georgia. Stalin's early life was marked by hardship. His father, a cobbler, was often violent, and his mother, a devout Christian, wanted her son to become a priest. However, Stalin had other ambitions. As a teenager, Stalin joined the Georgian Social Democratic movement, quickly gravitating toward Marxist ideology. He became involved in revolutionary activities, including organizing strikes and bank robberies to fund the Bolshevik cause. By 1905, he had become a key figure in the Georgian revolutionary underground. Stalin's rise within the Bolshevik Party was marked by his cunning and ruthlessness. After the October Revolution in 1917, Stalin, unlike many of his comrades, focused on consolidating power behind the scenes. He held various important positions, including the Commissar of Nationalities, where he managed the complex ethnic makeup of the Soviet Union. But it was Lenin's death in 1924 that set the stage for Stalin's true ascent. Lenin had left behind a power vacuum, and Stalin moved swiftly to fill it. Through a combination of political alliances, manipulation, and outright elimination of rivals, Stalin outmaneuvered key figures like Leon Trotsky, Zinoviev, and Kamenev. By the late 1920s, Stalin had established himself as the uncontested leader of the Soviet Union. Once in power, Stalin embarked on a series of radical policies that would change the Soviet Union forever. His most ambitious and devastating initiative was the forced collectivization of agriculture. Stalin believed that collectivizing farms would increase agricultural productivity and finance rapid industrialization. However, the reality was far grimmer. The policy led to widespread resistance, especially among the kulaks, or wealthier peasants, whom Stalin targeted as enemies of the state. The government's harsh response, combined with poor planning and severe requisitioning of grain, resulted in a catastrophic famine. The most notorious of these was the Holodomor in Ukraine, where millions perished between 1932 and 1933. Stalin's industrialization efforts were encapsulated in his series of five-year plans. The goal was to transform the Soviet Union from a predominantly agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. The results were mixed. While the Soviet Union did become a major industrial power, the human cost was staggering. Workers were subjected to brutal conditions, and any perceived failure to meet targets could result in imprisonment or death. But perhaps Stalin's most notorious policy was the Great Purge of the 1930s. Paranoia about internal enemies led Stalin to launch a campaign of political repression, eliminating thousands of perceived enemies within the Communist Party, the military, and the general population. The purges decimated the Red Army's leadership, which would have dire consequences during the early years of World War II. The Gulag system became a key instrument of Stalin's terror. These forced labor camps housed millions of prisoners, many of whom were ordinary citizens caught up in Stalin's purges. The conditions in the gulags were brutal, with high mortality rates due to overwork, starvation, and harsh climates. Stalin's reign also saw the rise of his cult of personality. Through relentless propaganda, Stalin was portrayed as the father of the nation, a wise and benevolent leader. He controlled every aspect of Soviet life, from the arts to education, ensuring that his version of reality was the only one Soviet citizens knew. As Europe moved toward war in the late 1930s, Stalin's foreign policy was one of caution and pragmatism. In 1939, Stalin shocked the world by signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Nazi Germany, a non-aggression treaty that included secret protocols dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, Stalin was initially caught off guard. The early months of the war were disastrous for the Soviet Union, with massive losses in both men and territory. But Stalin quickly adapted. He centralized military command, demanded total war efforts from the Soviet people, and implemented scorched earth tactics to deny the Germans resources. One of the turning points of the war was the Battle of Stalingrad. Stalin's decision to defend the city at all costs resulted in one of the bloodiest battles in history, but it marked the beginning of the Soviet push westward. By the time the war ended in 1945, the Soviet Union had not only defeated Nazi Germany, but also emerged as one of the world's two superpowers. However, Stalin's relationship with the Allies was fraught with tension. While the Soviet Union's role in defeating Nazi Germany was undeniable, Stalin's actions during and after the war sowed the seeds of the Cold War. His insistence on creating a buffer zone of communist states in Eastern Europe led to decades of East-West rivalry, shaping global politics for the remainder of the 20th century. Joseph Stalin's death in 1953 marked the end of an era, but his legacy continues to provoke debate. In the Soviet Union, Stalin was both revered and feared. His industrialization policies did transform the Soviet Union into a global power, but the human cost was enormous. Conservative estimates suggest that millions died as a result of his policies, whether through famine, purges, or the Gulag system. After his death, Stalin's successor, Nikita Khrushchev, famously denounced Stalin's crimes in a secret speech in 1956, initiating a period of de-Stalinization. This led to a more open acknowledgement of the atrocities committed under Stalin's rule, but it also left a complex legacy that continues to influence Russia today. In modern Russia, Stalin's image is a subject of contention. Some view him as a strong leader who made Russia a superpower, while others remember him as a brutal dictator responsible for untold suffering. The resurgence of nationalist sentiment in Russia has led to a partial rehabilitation of Stalin's image in recent years, with some praising his role in building a powerful state. The debate over Stalin's legacy is not just confined to Russia. Historians around the world continue to grapple with how to assess his impact. Was he a necessary force in the creation of a modern Soviet Union, or was his tyranny a tragedy that could have been avoided? These are questions that remain open to interpretation, reflecting the enduring complexity of Stalin's place in history. Joseph Stalin remains one of history's most enigmatic and controversial figures. His policies and actions reshaped the Soviet Union and had profound effects on the 20th century. But the debate over his legacy, whether as a tyrant or a titan, continues to this day. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life of Joseph Stalin. I hope this exploration has provided some insight into the man behind the myth and the lasting impact of his rule. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Acta Non Verba for more deep dives into the lives of history's most influential figures. Until then, I'm William, and this has been Acta Non Verba. Stay curious and keep exploring the past.